From the ashes of unimaginable tragedy, a footballing genius would rise to save a legendary club. This is the story of that resurrection, a tale of a talent so bright it could light up the world, and of demons so dark they could extinguish it in an instant. To follow this incredible journey from heartbreak to glory and back again, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on, because the legend we're about to uncover will change how you see the game. It's 1958. The air at Munich Airport is sharp with the biting cold of a German winter. Snow, thick and relentless, is falling from a heavy gray sky, blanketing the runway in a pristine, treacherous layer of white. Inside the terminal, a team of young men, champions the pride of Manchester, are waiting. This is Manchester United Matt Busby's Busby Babes. A team on the cusp of European greatness, stopping over to refuel on their way home from a triumphant European Cup tie in Belgrade. They are young, they are brilliant, and they are full of life. As they wait, the mood shifts. The weather, once just an inconvenience, is becoming a genuine threat. The pilots are uncertain. The slush on the runway is getting deeper, more dangerous. Twice they make the call to take off. Twice they power up the engines, the plane vibrating with intent, only to cut the power at the last moment. The uncertainty is unnerving. After the second failed attempt, the players are asked to disembark to return to the relative warmth and safety of the terminal. They file out, stretching their legs, sharing jokes to cut through the growing tension. They spend around 10 minutes in the lounge, 10 minutes that for some would be the last 10 minutes of their lives. The call comes to board again, a third attempt. As the plane lumbers down the snow-covered runway, it struggles for speed, for lift. There's a sickening sound, a violent shudder, as the aircraft fails to get airborne. It clips the fence at the end of the runway, a wing tears clean through a nearby house, which erupts in a plume of fire and smoke. And then silence, followed by screams. By the end of it, the world of football had been irrevocably broken. 23 people were dead. The heart of Manchester United had been ripped out. Most of the survivors were grievously injured. 2 gifted players would be told they could never, ever play the game again. Among the deceased were the colossal Duncan Edwards, a man many believed was destined to become England's greatest ever player, the captain Roger Byrne, and 6 other bright stars of that magnificent team. The disaster plunged Manchester United into a chaotic darkness. The club, which had finished the previous season as the champions of England, was now a hollowed-out shell. They would somehow finish that season, fielding a team of survivors, reserves, and emergency signings. But the spirit was gone. They ended the season in 9th place. The next few seasons were a struggle for survival. Only once in the following years would they manage to crack the top 5. The slide was slow, painful, and seemingly unstoppable. Then in 1963, 5 years after that fateful day in Munich, the club hit rock bottom. They finished the season just 3 points away from the humiliation of relegation. The dream wasn't just dead, its memory was fading. But then, something happened. The very next season, a spark ignited in the embers. The club, against all odds, managed a remarkable second-place finish. And it's impossible, absolutely impossible, not to acknowledge that this miraculous turnaround coincided with the full-time arrival into the first team of one boy. A boy whose name Manchester United fans, and indeed the world, would never ever forget. His name was George Best, and he was here to stay. These moments, this destiny, had been set in motion 3 years earlier. George Best was born in Belfast, Northern Ireland, into a deeply religious family. He was by all accounts a great student, bright and sharp, but his mind had a habit of wandering, always following the trail of a football. My point is, this wasn't just a hobby for him. It was a calling. At the tender age of 15, his otherworldly talent was spotted by Bob Bishop, a Manchester United scout. Bishop didn't waste time with a lengthy report. He didn't need to. He immediately sent a telegram to the legendary manager, Matt Busby. The message was simple, direct, and it would become the stuff of football legend. It simply said, "I think I've found you a genius." He arrived at the Manchester United Academy, a skinny kid with magic in his boots. But the transition was brutal. He was terribly homesick, and because of apprentice regulations at the time, he couldn't be formally signed as he was from outside England. But the club knew what they had. They found him a job working at the Manchester Ship Canal, a way to keep him close, a way to ensure he could still practice with the team. They knew they couldn't let this one slip away. He was a genius, no doubt, but he was also just a boy, barely a man thrust into a new world, far from home with the weight of an unproven prophecy on his shoulders. What do you think is more important for a young player's success, that raw, undeniable talent, or the mental fortitude to handle the immense pressure and loneliness that comes with it? Let me know your honest thoughts down in the comments below. By the time he was 18, he was ready. He would take part in that season. I just told you about the one where United surged to second place. And while the goals didn't exactly start pouring from the get-go, the signs were all there. The balance, the control, the audacious dribbling that left defenders chasing shadows. He was still playing for the youth team as well, and in a moment of beautiful symbolism, he captained them to their first FA Youth Cup win since the Munich disaster. It was a sign. The revival was beginning. The following season, his progression was staggering. He netted 10 league goals, a significant contribution that would prove absolutely massive. United with Best, now a fixture in the side, would clinch the league title on goal difference. The theater of dreams was beginning to believe again. But it was 1966 that would catapult George Best from a promising talent into a genuine superstar. Manchester United were back in the European Cup, the competition that had cost them so much. They traveled to Lisbon for an away match against the mighty Benfica, led by the formidable Eusebio. Faced with this iconic opposition on the biggest stage, a lesser player might have crumbled. But George Best wasn't a lesser player. He was a genius. He didn't just play well. He dominated. He managed to score twice in the first 11 minutes, a whirlwind of skill and audacity that sent the Portuguese media, and indeed the whole of Europe, into a frenzy. The next day, the headlines weren't just about the match. They were about him. The newspapers coined a nickname that would stick with him for the rest of his life, a name that perfectly captured his rock and roll style and his place in the cultural zeitgeist. They called him the Fifth Beatle. An injury in May meant he wouldn't get his hands on any trophies that season, but it didn't matter. His rise was now more than imminent. It was inevitable. He came back the following season hungrier than ever, and once again led Manchester United to another First Division title. The long shadow of the disaster that had haunted the club for a decade was finally truly beginning to recede. A new legend was being forged at Old Trafford. An iconic trio that would be immortalized in bronze. There was Bobby Charlton, the graceful survivor of Munich, a man who had actually switched seats on that fateful plane with one of the players who died. There was Denis, the king, the lethal striker who had arrived from Torino 4 years after the disaster. And of course, there was George Best. They had picked up a team that was not just struggling, but was rampantly dying down, and they had transformed it into one of the best and most feared sides in all of Europe. Except, so far, no European success had come from it. The ultimate prize, the one that had been stolen from them in the cruelest way imaginable, was still out of reach. All of this, the tragedy, the rebuilding, the rise of a genius, was the prelude. It was the setup so that I can swiftly carry on to telling you about the 1967 to 1968 season. Now United would eventually miss out on the league title to their crosstown rivals, Manchester City. And Best himself would become the youngest player to ever win the league's Player of the Year award. But that year, that incredible season, will be remembered for something else entirely. It would have felt almost unfair, a cruel joke, if Best had come out of that season with a personal record of 37 goals and no major team title to show for it. And yes, of course, that would have been a shame. But that year, it wasn't about the domestic competitions. That year, their eyes, their hearts, their entire being was focused on a much bigger prize: the European Cup. After getting through the first 3 rounds, it was time to face the giants. They were drawn against 2 of the 3 clubs who had managed to win the famous trophy more than once. First up, the mighty Real Madrid. At a packed and roaring Old Trafford, Best would be the major key to unlocking the Spanish defense. He got the only goal of the game, a slender but vital lead to take to the Bernabeu. The second leg was a cauldron of pressure. United found themselves down 3-1, their dream crumbling with just 17 minutes left on the clock. But this team had been forged in fire. They refused to die. They fought back, clawing their way to a 3-3 draw, and they were through to the final. And who would they face? Of course, it had to be them. Eusebio's Benfica once more. The stage was set at Wembley. Best had already shown he could perform against them. Surely he could do it again. The match was tense, a tactical battle, and after 90 minutes, a goal from each team sent the final into grueling extra time. The fatigue was immense, the pressure suffocating. And then, just 7 minutes into extra time, George Best decided the time for waiting was over. With a great tenacious effort, he won the ball back. Suddenly, the pitch opened up before him. He was through. He had only the goalkeeper to beat, and of course he would. But not with a simple shot. That wasn't his style. With the world watching with the weight of a decade of history on his shoulders, he danced. He feinted, he shimmied. He dribbled around the helpless keeper before coolly, almost casually, slotting the ball into the empty net. That was the moment. That was the key that unlocked everything. It broke Benfica's spirit. Their groove was gone, replaced by desperation. United sensed it. They went for the kill, adding 2 more goals for a resounding 4-1 thrashing before the end of extra time. The whistle blew. It was over. 10 years after their dream had died on a snowy runway in Munich, Manchester United were champions of Europe. They had done it. From the depths of despair to the absolute pinnacle of European football. It's stories of resilience like this, of rising from the ashes, that truly define the beautiful game. If you love these incredible journeys of legends who changed football forever, make sure you subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell, because we have so many more tales of triumph, heartbreak, and pure genius to share with you. And at the heart of it all was a 22-year-old from Belfast. George Best had conquered everything any player could wish for. Well, almost everything. There was still the small matter of the Ballon d'Or. But by the end of the year, that too was his. He edged out all the other great players of that incredible era, from Eusebio to Beckenbauer. He even beat out his own teammate, the heroic Bobby Charlton, by just 8 votes. George Best was officially crowned the best player in the world. And then, the decline would start. He would never win another major trophy again. The summit had been reached, and the only way was down. The club would suffer even more. It wasn't just Best who was declining. Charlton and Law were now getting into their 30s. The legs weren't what they once were. The magic was fading. The very next season started with a loss in the Intercontinental Cup, followed by early exits in all other competitions. And above all, an atrocious 11th place finish in the league. It was too much for the man who had built it all. Matt Busby, the father figure, the architect of the dream, abandoned his spot as the team's coach. From here on, it was just an incredible, heartbreaking downfall. The next season, there was one last defiant flash of the old magic. Best scored an incredible 6 goals in a single FA Cup match against Northampton Town. It was a staggering display, a reminder of the God-given talent that was still there. But it would be one of his last truly big moments. The troubles which had always simmered beneath the surface began to boil over. He was getting into trouble more and more frequently, the headlines now, about his life off the pitch rather than on it. The stories were of women, of endless partying, of a genius squandering his gift. It reached a point where in 1972, at just 26 years of age, he shocked the world by announcing his retirement. Regardless, he would show up to the preseason training and keep going, a flickering flame that refused to be completely extinguished. But the next season, his behavior got worse and worse. He felt the club's bored, and even some of the younger players were unworthy of sharing the pitch with him. The arrogance, once a part of his charm, had curdled into contempt, so much so that he would simply go missing for a while, not showing up to training, not appearing for matches, as he spent his days and nights partying in London. Once he finally came back, he was fined and placed on the transfer list. In response, he once again announced his retirement. At this point, Best was simply a loose cannon. There's really no other way of putting it. The boy genius was gone, replaced by a troubled, unpredictable man. He would go on to play for 10 more years, a nomadic existence that took him to all sorts of countries and clubs, a shadow of the player he once was. First, there were 3 very short spells in South Africa. Then a stint in the English 4th Division and a return to Ireland. He had a sort of a comeback when he joined Fulham in the 2nd Division, attracted to the team by the presence of legends like Bobby Moore and Rodney Marsh. But even that wouldn't last too long. Eventually, he left for the United States, where he would play for several teams in the burgeoning North American Soccer League, like the LA Aztecs, the Fort Lauderdale Strikers, and the San Jose Earthquakes. The flair was still there in flashes, but the fire was gone. But that still wouldn't be enough to satisfy his restless spirit. He had a really odd time playing for Hibernian FC in Scotland, a team on the verge of relegation. They would pay him per match played rather than a weekly wage. And though he couldn't save them from the drop, his mere presence attracted immense crowds to the stadium fans, desperate for one last glimpse of the magic. After this, it somehow still managed to get stranger. He would leave for Hong Kong, of all possible leagues. And in a bizarre footnote, he would also become part of a professional darts team while he was there. Before the end of his career, he would have very short, forgettable stints at Bournemouth, the Brisbane Lions in Australia, Nuneaton Town, and finally Tobermoor United, back in his native Northern Ireland. Throughout his career, he of course kept playing for the Northern Ireland national team. But being surrounded by what he considered to be inferior players, he never put his mind fully into it. He treated it, in his own words, as recreational football. It's a story with so many layers, unbelievable triumph, unimaginable tragedy, and a profound warning about the fragility of genius. If this story of football's first true superstar moved, you consider sharing it with a fellow fan who'd appreciate it. And tell me which other legends with complex dramatic stories should we explore next. I'm always looking for your suggestions in the comments. George Best was many things, but above all, he was the prototype for the modern football superstar. Controversial, edgy, a playboy, but also absolutely incredible on the pitch. He was extremely impressive technically, without a doubt one of the greatest dribblers the sport has ever seen. He was super fast with great heading and passing ability, and honestly, above all, he possessed an exceptional, almost supernatural sense of balance. After his career finally fizzled out, he just kept spiraling deeper and deeper into alcoholism. He would eventually only make headlines for the worst reasons, swearing on live TV public brawls and a heartbreaking inability to stop drinking, even after a life-saving liver transplant. He would eventually die from complications caused by his chronic drinking habits. In his final days, he made a haunting request. He asked a newspaper to post a photo of him in his hospital bed, gaunt and frail, with a simple, powerful headline, "Don't die like me." Around 25,000 people attended his funeral in Belfast. Several of football's greatest ever players paid homage to him. Diego Maradona, who in a strange twist of fate would die on the same day 15 years later, would tell the press that Best had shaped the player he would eventually become. He had always been the target of great praise from other legends. Pelé himself once said that George Best was the greatest player he ever saw. Still to this day, a statue of Best, Charlton and Law, the Holy Trinity, stands proudly in front of Old Trafford, a permanent monument to the men who rebuilt a dream. Now let's get into the ranking system. And guys, bear with me on this, because over the last few days researching him, my appreciation for the man, for the player, has just gone through the roof. I understand now more than ever why so many of you love him so much. But in reality, his mind was set on the wrong objectives, and he ended up not playing at the top for nearly long enough. And as much as I want to see his name right at the very top of our leaderboard, he most likely won't do too well in some crucial categories. Regardless, let's do this. First up, finishing. He wasn't exceptionally prolific with 180 goals across nearly 500 matches for Manchester United. But at his absolute peak, he averaged around a goal every 2 matches, which is fantastic for a winger. And he was able to score from range with flair and even with his head quite frequently. So I'd say an 8 out of 10 is fair. Then we should get into his playmaking. It's a crying shame there are no reliable records for his assist providing, and the lack of good complete match footage from back then is frustrating. But reading about him, listening to those who played with and against him, it can easily be noted that he possessed exceptional vision and an incredible passing ability. For me, it has to be a 10 out of 10. Also dribbling. Well, not a tough choice here, now is it? Just look at the guy. So effortless, so graceful, so devastatingly effective. It was pure art. An amazing, easy 10 out of 10. Speed and physicality is a lot tougher to judge. He was short and not the strongest player at all, in a physical sense. But he had that perfect, uncanny balance, insane acceleration over the first few yards, and he was an incredibly tough guy to actually take down. He just bounced off challenges. I'm giving him a 9 out of 10. Finally, mentality. And this is just unfortunate, but it has to be addressed. Best was too easily and too often distracted by alcohol, by partying, and by women. And while it takes some serious determination to help rebuild a club like he did from the ashes, the way his career fizzled out speaks volumes. It's still a 6 out of 10. Longevity and adaptability. There's really only one way to judge his adaptability. We never saw him at his prime playing anywhere else but Manchester United. But we did see how he managed to still put up numbers and be the main man when that United team was in the worst of places. In terms of longevity, it's just sad to see. His absolute peak lasted for 6 years at most. It's a 7 out of 10. Flair. This just goes hand in hand with his dribbling, doesn't it? It was who he was. The nutmegs, the shimmies, the confidence. Of course, it's another 10 out of 10. The trophy cabinet is hard to judge. I think it's a similar situation to Eusebio. There's not too much going on with the national team, and he played most of his meaningful career at the same club. So he'll get the same rating as Eusebio, a 7 out of 10. The icon factor is tough. I feel he's in a similar situation to Roberto Baggio, being sort of forgotten or underrated by the younger generations, but still absolutely beloved and revered by his core fan base and by those who know the history of the game. It's a 9 out of 10. This totals out to a score of 77 out of 90. And that puts him level with Roberto Baggio. That's interesting. And honestly, I can see some similarities there. 2 absolute geniuses loved by their core fan base. but who both had their careers massively disturbed by something that wasn't necessarily under their complete control. And before we go, I'd also like to show everyone that I've added Rivaldo from the last episode and also Alessandro Del Piero, because I actually forgot about him. I don't know how he just slipped through the cracks. But yeah, if you were wondering, here are Del Piero's and Rivaldo's scores on the board. And that's where this incredible, tragic, and beautiful football story concludes. What a journey, right? I'm so eager to hear your thoughts on this one. What moment from Best's career stood out to you the most? Did his struggle resonate with you, or do you see it as a talent wasted? Please share all your opinions, your favorite moments, and any questions you have in the comments below. I truly love reading every single one of them and building this amazing football community with all of you. That was it for this week. See you in the next one. Bye.